Been warning of this for a while, despite many of who have attacked me. But the reality of this situation is that the Trump administration is working at warp speed to turn America into the same surveillance superstate nightmare that is China. The writing is on the wall, with the Palantir being officially tapped to not only make a database for the IRS, which we were totally lied to about being dismantled, but our own massive digital prison is being constructed right in front of our eyes. The data will be weaponized against us in the coming social credit beast system. So it's coming. Don't sit there and tell me that it's still better than Kamala, because she was never going to win anyhow. Trump was selected for this time to fulfill this plan, and there is no Democrat that could have pulled this off without much resistance. But Trump is the perfect guy to pull this off because he quiets a lot of the natural opposition to this, right? Just like when Barack Obama was president, it quieted all those people who were normally speaking out against his warmongering and his giveaways to the banks. Those people shut up because they didn't want to criticize Barack Obama. Donald Trump is the same thing. So the people who would normally stand up to this kind of digital currency, this kind of surveillance state apparatus, they're now being quieted because of their support for Donald Trump. It's time to face facts. Both parties are just as bad as Republicans see the Democrats. It's just different faces, disguises, and personalities, which are put in place by the same masters to fool us into thinking we have choice. Well, we don't. You have owners. They own you. George Carlin, that's exactly right. So let me bring in our guest. Tell me about how Palantir is expanding their surveillance. If you think the government will only use these tools to track illegal immigrants, think again. So tell me, how did this come about with Palantir? And they were not a company, and then the CIA took billions of dollars and gave it to Alex Karp and said, start a company. Isn't that basically what happened?
Yeah, Jimmy, that's very true. The beginnings of Palantir relating to CIA venture capital funding from NQTEL, which many of the big tech firms have received in the post 9/11 world, and absolutely the creation of Palantir really comes from the alleged end of the controversial U.S. government surveillance program known as Total Information Awareness. And I want to say, just as an aside, I'm so glad that a platform as big as yours and Patriot Voice, I don't really follow him, but others are ready to have this conversation about Palantir and Peter Thiel, because my colleagues Whitney Webb, Ryan Christian at The Last American Vagabond, James Corbett, who you've talked to, and a few others I could name, have been really trying to sound the alarm bells about this since before the election, and telling people this was probably where things were going, because we could see the ties with Palantir and Peter Thiel and JD Vance, et cetera. And as you said, they come straight from the intelligence background, come straight from CIA. And then not only that, just last year, we saw that Palantir, along with Musk's companies and OpenAI, Anduril, and others, they actually formed a new pact where they're essentially trying to make themselves be the new, fresh, hip, young military industrial complex contractors. Like, they're seeking to replace Boeing, Northrop Grumman, and others, Raytheon, and kind of make themselves the next generation of that. So for me, shouldn't be too surprising. I get that a lot of people did put hope and faith and Trump would be better than the other side, but I also think your analysis and what you and Kurt were saying at the end of the last segment is 100% true. And what Patriot Voice was saying there is no political solution. Both of these parties are owned and managed by these people. And I also think it's important for people to understand this isn't just a private surveillance firm, which is problematic on its own, but both Alex Karp and Peter Thiel are steering committee members of the Bilderberg Group, which is getting ready to meet next week in Switzerland. And for those who don't know or haven't heard of the Bilderberg Group over the years, they have been one of the most secretive kind of roundtable groups representing the true hidden ruling class. I wouldn't say they are the ruling class, but this is a private, secretive meeting of heads of state, big executives, media people, bankers, finance, et cetera, that's been meeting since the 1950s. And they meet every May or June, largely in secret. It's only the last decade or so that they've put up a website, and occasionally The Guardian, Charlie Skelton will report on it. But for the most part, the mainstream still ignores it. So you have this secretive group with Peter Thiel and Alex Karp, who have been attendees for a long time, but have become steering committee members, along with people like Eric Schmidt, who's the former CEO of Google, and other folks, other deep state actors who are the steering committee member of that group. They've found all these companies, including Palantir, through Peter Thiel's foundations, the Thiel Fellowship, and so many other organizations, He's influencing, he's got his tentacles everywhere. And I've written some articles over at the Last American Vagabond showing how many Peter Thiel acolytes are a part of Doge and have been a part of the Trump administration starting right away in January. And it's at least, I would say, 15 to 20 or more people in very important positions that have a connection to Palantir directly or to Peter Thiel and Alex Karp in one of their many different affiliated organizations.
Well, let's go over what's actually happening right now. So this is an article from Reason just the other day, and it says when people complain about big tech, they tend to mean companies like Meta, Google, and Twitter, entities providing free tools and platforms that we can choose whether to use. Much less attention is directed at the tech companies helping to the federal government consolidate and analyze data on all of us. Companies like the data analytics firm Palantir, created by PayPal co-founder and Donald Trump supporter Peter Thiel. Palantir has a lot of people have taken cheap shots at me saying that somehow I work for Peter Thiel and that I don't criticize him when I've done so repeatedly, but I just want to throw that out. Palantir has long been connected to government surveillance. It was founded in part with CIA money. It has served as an immigration and customs enforcement contractor since 2011, and it's been used for everything from local law enforcement to COVID-19 efforts. But the prominence of Palantir tools in federal agencies seem to be growing under President Trump. The company has received more than $113 million in federal government spending since Trump took office, including additional funds from existing contracts as well as new contracts with the Department of Homeland Security and the Pentagon. That's according to the New York Times. And this, by the way, that figure does not include the almost $1 billion that contract that the Department of Defense awarded the company just last week, which, by the way, has not been spent. So Palantir's technology has largely been used by the military and the intelligence agencies, the immigration enforcers, and the police, but its use could be expanding, you think? Representatives of Palantir are also speaking to at least two other agencies, the Social Security Administration and the Internal Revenue Service, about buying its technology, according to 6 government officials and Palantir employees with knowledge of the discussion. Along with the Trump administration's efforts to share more data across federal agencies, this signals that Palantir's huge data analysis capabilities could wind up being wielded against all Americans. I think we could get rid of the could. This won't allow the authorities to watch us more so much as it helps them make use of all the data it's already got on us. But that's unsettling too. The ultimate concern is a panopticon of a single federal database with everything the government knows about every single person in the country. What we are seeing is likely the first step in creating that centralized dossier on everyone in the country. So if you're worried about digital currency and you're worried about if you protested, would they debank you and shut down like they did to the truckers and yes, that's what this is all about. Washington already has a ton of data on all of us, but it's often separated across systems and agencies. By linking it all together, the government could create much more detailed profiles on all of us. More efficient, probably, but also more dangerous. Right now, Trump administration is using Palantir tools for immigration enforcement. Those tools could easily be applied to other administration targets, including immigration protesters, pro-Palestinian protesters, and so on. Anybody who protested anything, a pipeline through your neighborhood, anything, they're going to use it against you and they'll call you a terrorist. And of course, a future Democratic administration could use them to track people for its own ends too. Once we've got giant data troves on every American that can easily be analyzed and shared across agencies, it seems unlikely that any administration will say, no thanks, shut it down, and we don't need total information on everybody. Perhaps when we worry about big tech, we should spend less time focused on what people can say on social media and more time focused on the companies actively helping to expand their surveillance state. So just to let you know, Palantir's database isn't like the others. It's going to combine tax filings, student debt, Social Security, bank accounts, medical claims, immigration status. No previous database system has ever centralized this much personal info across various federal agencies. And so this is the kind of stuff that you've been warning people about, correct? And what do you think this? Do you think people are going to wake up to this?
I don't know, Jimmy. Well, I want to say that tweet right there, which is my buddy Jason Bassett over at the Free Thought Project. Jason's 100% right. And the Reason article at the end is right, that this is new in the sense that it's breaking down walls of agencies that have, to some degree, had separation, or at least that's what we've been told. You know, the CIA is in their own world, FBI is in their own world, NCIA, et cetera. Trump's executive order, as the New York Times reported and as everybody's been picking up, was about so-called streamlining and making these processes more efficient. And really, this goes back to the post 9/11 world. This was right after 9/11. The sort of mainstream official story is that, well, because the different agencies weren't able to interact correctly, you know, we missed some vital information, and this allowed these alleged terrorist attacks to happen. I think many people out there now question that official narrative, but that same story is being used in 2025 to say, in order for us to more correctly track immigrants or violent gang members, et cetera, we need to have it set up so these systems are not siloed and separated. And for anybody who's been around for a little while, or anybody who's still out there paying attention, I want you to go check out a 2006 documentary called From Freedom to Fascism. Aaron Russo, who was a Hollywood director, he made this documentary before his death. And way back then, he was warning about the dangers of integrating these systems. And they kind of have this silly skit that they do where somebody calls in for pizza, and the systems are all connected. And so the pizza person says, "Oh, we noticed, Mr. Smith, that you have your cholesterol's high. So if you get this extra large pizza with all the sausage and whatever, we're going to have to raise your insurance rates." And you know, just all these different ways that the interconnectivity can not only be problematic for surveillance and privacy and liberty, obviously, but in all these other unseen ways that people might not be thinking about. And I really hope people are ready to start questioning this, because you know, you pointed out in the previous conversations about the different roles Palantir has been playing. I just wanted to make note of a couple others, because they talked about the IRS, they talked about being used for immigration purposes. Obviously, I wrote an article recently called "Welcome to the Palantir World Order," and as I said a moment ago, Elon's Doge, they both, of course, come from the PayPal mafia. They've had a long relationship. Doge is filled with Peter Thiel acolytes, Palantir acolytes. The U.S. government is also working on overhauling all their federal payment systems through a Peter Thiel connected company called Ramp. And then Peter Thiel and his companies are also now investing in nuclear energy, and through their connections with the Trump administration are trying to get the Department of Energy to start working on low enriched uranium, which is part of them trying to create new data centers, which is what's going to power all of this digital technocratic surveillance state they're building, because you know, they need a lot of power to do it. So that's another thing they're getting involved with, nuclear energy, the IRS, as we mentioned. The other one is, you guys were talking about the Golden Dome before. Of course, that is a Peter Thiel project through Palantir, but it's also partnered with Elon Musk's SpaceX that's helping do that Golden Dome. And I personally don't think anybody should be blindly trusting, or just trusting in general, Peter Thiel, Alex Karp, and I would include Elon Musk, despite anything he may be saying in the news lately, because you know, when you look at what's really going on, Elon Musk is also a military-industrial contractor, and his program under SpaceX. People know about SpaceX, they know about Starlink, the sort of public side of the internet, but the military side is called Starshield, and we only learned about this in the last year. This is another $1.8 billion contract with the Geospatial Agency, which handles all the U.S. satellites. Every time Elon does a little rocket launch and everybody cheers it on, what they're also doing is they're working with the military and sending out classified payloads of satellites that are going all around the world. And sure, some of it's going to Starlink for public internet use, but I wrote an article a while back talking about how the head of the Geospatial Agency, he actually was quoted as saying, "You can't hide," that once they finish this Starshield program, all the bad guys, of course, it won't be used against good people and just regular folks like us, but all the bad guys will no longer be able to hide. So, I mean, really what I think is we're seeing this sort of unfolding of this PayPal mafia, which has been, you know, not necessarily behind the scenes, but most people haven't been paying attention to them until the last couple of years, have been really working with intelligence agencies, directly with the CIA and other intelligence agencies, and now directly with the military, and of course now directly with the White House. This is unprecedented access. It doesn't mean that it just started with Trump, of course, or anything like that. But the way I see these things work is that one party does something and they pass the baton to the next one, like you were just describing earlier with Obama and with Bush. And that's just been this perpetual thing. And I know people want to believe there's somebody coming to save the day. I personally believe this has been a long psyop of making Trump look like this anti-establishment hero. I also agree with what you said earlier. I don't trust the Butler assassination in any means, at any way at all. I think that was part of this, to get people to say he was touched by the hand of God. And now I got to vote for him. And, you know, Mark Zuckerberg and all the big tech guys come out and cheer for him. So I'm very skeptical of that, and I don't think that's beyond the realm of possibility with everything that we know. I mean, we're talking about, you mentioned Epstein earlier. We could talk all day about all the various intelligence operations and just depravity that we know the U.S. government and other governments have been involved in. And I just personally don't understand how people can be deep in that research and then at the same time turn around and think that voting is going to fix the problem that we're facing. And I'm not saying we shouldn't try to do something, but I long ago have let go of the idea that voting and politics is going to fix this, because they simply have too much control over that system. And the intelligence agencies combined with the big tech companies, like if you go back to Cambridge Analytica and all the data that we saw they had access to, they are now able to just take our social media profiles, turn it into an algorithm, and take the exact things that they know we want to hear that will feed right into our biases and just feed that back to us. And this is why many people are skeptical of talking heads on the internet, or whether it's Elon Musk or billionaires or whoever, because we understand the sort of the true depth of this operation. We can't necessarily say, okay, this person is working for the CIA. People got suspicions or whatever, and some of that's unhealthy. But my point is that people are overall, they're sick of these lies, I think, and they're really trying to find a way to get to real solutions. And I hope people will start to see that neither of the big parties are going to save us. I don't know if the political system will save us at all.
Okay, Derrick, I think maybe you hit a button or something. Do you see what's happening with your...
I see that. My camera just reset. It'll go away in a second. Sorry about that.
Okay, so I wanted to show you this. This is Catherine Fitz. We've had her on the show before, and she was in the George W. Bush administration, and ever since then she's been kind of a truth teller. And I guess we're gonna just wait for his camera to reset. Should we wait? Looks like he went away for a second. Is he back? Oh, you're back, but that stuff is still on.
Give it about 20 seconds. Sorry, Jimmy.
Okay, so I'm going to play this video of Catherine Austin Fitz, and we'll get your response.
And what it looks to me like Trump and Musk are implementing the control grid at high speed. What you have to say is, okay, to do a control grid, we need a digital ID implemented that's very high quality, high precise. Check the box. We need an all digital financial system. Check the box. We need a way of doing interoperable money. Check the box. If you look at what Doge is doing, we need a social credit system. Check the box.
Wait, what do you mean by that? What Doge is doing?
Danny, they've been aggregating this kind of data. I used to call it the data beast. So they've been aggregating this kind of powerful data since the 90s. So I don't think this is all new. So, for example,
IRS data, healthcare data, and combining it all together into one system combined with AI.
It's interesting because Musk was out raising capital for XAI and had a deal with Palantir AI at the same time. And my guess, I think
Palantir has an AI?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Well, according to published reports, XAI and Palantir had made a partnership, and when Musk was sucking all this data out. And my guess is that data is, they sucked it into the AI on the just do it method. So if I wanted to stop fraud in the U.S. government, I would say there's 20 trillion missing from DOD, there's $1 trillion missing from HUD. I'm going to go in, figure out where it went, get it back.
Right.
That's not what they did. If you said to me, I want to build a social credit system that can be used to enforce control against the American people and basically lock them down with both enforcement and social credit, I would go get the Social Security data, the IRS data, and the Treasury payment data, and that's exactly what they did.
So Trump is actually building a control grid of it's like he's a robot right out of the WEF or China for that matter. It's the exact opposite of what MAGA thought they were voting for, right? I mean, let me just get your response to what she said. That's happening, right?
100%. And Catherine Austin Fitz of Solari does great work. She's part of the Independent Media Alliance that myself and Whitney and Ryan formed. And Catherine has been ahead of this. In fact, that documentary I mentioned from 2006, Catherine was in it. She's been warning about this coming, and she's been able to see this. And I will just point out, too, what she's describing there is it's important for people to understand that deep relationship that Palantir and Peter Thiel and Elon Musk have. I know that there's this, I'm just trying to crack through the illusion that people think Elon is a hero. I personally think that is another psyop that a lot of people are falling into. And Elon may have just played his role, and then now he's stepping away. What people need to understand is that Doge, the actual purpose of Doge, as Catherine was outlining there, is to make government more efficient but not in the sense of make it more efficient to work better for people, but to make it a more technocratic government. And for those who don't really understand or know the history of technocracy, I'll just briefly outline.
So you know what? Hang on.
If you don't mind, Jimmy.
I'm going to actually hold off one
Sure.
second on that, and because I'm going to show that short documentary that you put together, which is very. But just to kind of put a button on this Palantir segment of this of today's show, it took just 6 weeks to go from ICE partnering with Palantir to track immigrants to the government partnering with Palantir to track all Americans. That's from the TrumpFile.org. And here's the guy who runs Palantir. We've showed him before. He's a true psychopath. He's the perfect guy that the CIA would pick to do this job. And Reed Cooley tweets out, CIA agent and head of Palantir, Alex Karp, says his company's software single-handedly stopped the far right in Europe. So let's listen to him say this.
Look, we built PG, which single-handedly stopped the rise of the far right in Europe. We built Foundry, which was just used.
So when he says they stopped, so what he's saying is they stopped a populist political movement that was spurred on by open borders policies, that was spurred on by more war and NATO. So what he's saying is this CIA guy, which is what he is, their company couldn't have started or without the money from the CIA. The CIA, there wasn't a company. The CIA gave them billions of dollars and said, go start doing this. And they did it. And so he's bragging that they actually squashed populist political movements. And the way they do the cover for doing that and talking about it publicly is they call it far right. Well, if there's anything more far right than funding literal Nazis, which is what the European Union is doing in Ukraine, that I don't know what it is, because that's what far right is. They're talking about people pushing back against open borders and people pushing back against censorship. That's not far right. That used to be called unions activity in the United States and lefties, but they call it far right, just like they call me far right. So any time the establishment wants to discredit you or dismiss you, they call you far right. And that's what he's doing there. What he's really admitting to is that we, the CIA, use their technology to stop a populist political movement. The same kind of populist political movement MAGA thought Donald Trump was going to be. And it turns out he was a wolf in sheep's clothing, and it was a Trojan horse. Because now that Donald Trump is inside the beast, he's unleashing pukes like this on you, and he's going to create a social credit system for you. He's going to create a digital ID for you and digital banking, and it's all going to be undone under one thing, and it's all going to be run by guys like this, not people you vote for. Donald Trump doesn't even understand how this works. So let's listen to what else he has to say. So
Used to distribute the COVID vaccine and saved millions of lives.
so they were involved in COVID, forcing people to take experimental medical treatments at the behest of the state, which is really the techno-feudal corporate state.
Globally, we built what we call multi-constellation, and what's often called the digital kill chain, and they're category-defining products. So when you deliver these products to the market, just honestly, people say this isn't going to exist, this isn't valuable, but then it changes the market, and then the market is the Palantir market. Now that doesn't mean everyone in the world is going to buy our product, but it means most of the sensible people in the world are going to buy from the category we defined.
So what he's saying there is that, you've heard this term, the Internet of Bodies, right? And so through the Internet of Bodies, they're going to even know our thoughts. And this is very much like, science fiction. I remember the Minority Report with Tom Cruise, where they could predict that you were going to do a crime and then go arrest you. That's what they're kind of talking about here. And so if you are a dissenter to the establishment, or you are in opposition to the establishment, they're going to use this against you. They're even able to do pre-thought crimes. This is all using AI, right? And so here the Patriot Voice tweets out, Palantir is literally the deepest part of the deep state, and Trump is rolling out the red carpet for them to usher in what will certainly be the beast system, a cashless society in which you will be tracked and monitored every second of every day, and your behavior will dictate how you get to live in society. This is absolutely the Great Reset and Build Back Better repackaged MAGA style. The biggest rug pull in history. Would you agree with that, Derrick? That this is the biggest rug pull in history?
Absolutely. I mean, it's ironic to me, Jimmy, that just 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, some of the same people that were protesting as Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum, calling for many of the same things now that Palantir and Trump's tech buddies are doing, were fighting it then, I think rightfully so, and we're being targeted for doing so. And now many places, I'm sure you and your audience are seeing the same things I'm seeing online. There's a lot of people making excuses. It's no big deal. We've had databases like this.
Yes.
It's, or even the QAnon sort of stories. I've seen people saying, no, Trump's actually working with Palantir because he's going to target the deep state, not the regular people. It's just used to target the deep state. So don't worry about it. It's all very sad. And I see you have my book up there. I mean, if people want to learn more about solutions, I know we're going to play my little mini documentary in a moment, but I do want to encourage people, you can download my book for free at theconsciousresistance.com/how-to, theconsciousresistance.com/how-to. There's a free audiobook and a free PDF. I wrote it the month before COVID started because in my journalism, I focused on facial recognition, social credit scores, and digital technology. And I started thinking, like, how are we going to thrive and survive outside of what they're building? And so I put a lot of time and thought into that, but I didn't think it was going to happen so quickly. But nevertheless, I think people need to understand, no matter who's president, the true ruling class, what I call the predator class, they operate behind and above the political system and political parties. And so no matter which corporate party's in there, they will find a way to advance that agenda. And often they do so by presenting a hero, whether that's Bernie Sanders or Donald Trump or RFK or whoever it may be. They will continue. And I'm sure we'll see another one in the next couple of years. Some sort of grassroots hero will rise and promise they're going to fix and save us from Trump. And, it'll just keep going back and forth until people are ready to see what's really going on.
And so so that your book, How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State, how can people opt out? Can you give us a couple of,
Sure.
ways to do that?
I'm an extremist, I'll say that. I try to push very hard into this. I haven't used banks since 2008. I only have a passport. I'm not like a sovereign citizen or something like that. I simply just try to rethink and reevaluate my relationship with technology and different forms. So I opt out of the facial recognition at the airport as it's rolling out while we still can. I opt out of the TSA body scanners. I don't use Google. I don't use Microsoft. I'm on a Linux laptop right now, things like that. So I try to take steps I can in my own individual life and encourage other people to do the same. I also don't use big banks. I encourage people to use credit unions or to look into any alternative. I'm not going to tell you what to do. Maybe there's private Monero, cryptos like Monero or gift economy or barter, whatever you're into. I think the point is that we should focus our energy on building parallel alternative systems outside of what they're building. Even in that infamous essay and video that people saw back in 2020, the World Economic Forum, you will own nothing and be happy. If you go back and read the original article, which came out in 2016 and was published at the Wall Street Journal, as well as the World Economic Forum's website, even in that dystopian description of the future where you have no privacy and no property and it's some alleged utopia, even in that description, the World Economic Forum says, sometimes I worry about the people we left behind, the people who now live outside of the cities in 18th and 19th century towns. And they kind of make it seem like we're living in poverty out there. But I believe even that is somewhat of an acknowledgement that there will be people who opt out of these systems and live maybe outside that. I don't mean like we're living in some dystopia. I think it's possible through things like permaculture and using technology in a private way to start to lay the foundation for a path for humanity that doesn't involve being subsumed by this world they're building. But we have to work fast because very quickly, as digital IDs are rolling out, which is already happening and already advanced by COVID, as facial recognition advances, social credit scores, things like this, it is going to become increasingly difficult to operate. Anybody who's already operating in the mainstream system without a credit score understands how difficult it is currently. But imagine when that's the social credit score you were describing, Jimmy, and you want to opt out of those systems. If there's nowhere to opt into or there's no alternative, then we're essentially screwed. There's nothing to do. And we end up like China, where activists can have their WeChat, one app to rule them all, turned off if they try to organize anti-COVID protests, or people can have their bank accounts turned off and things like that. We're already seeing the early version of that with Patreon, PayPal, and some of the banking, like you mentioned, the Canadian truckers movement, but it's going to get much worse. And so I focus on how do we opt out and build alternative parallel systems, whether that's health, finance, education, food, all these different areas. One just real quick other example, if you don't like Monsanto, you don't like the big box stores, I'm sure there's a farmer's market somewhere near you. Go meet the people who are growing the food you like, get to know the farmers. I'm not saying you need to become a farmer, but start to build those relationships so that you're not dependent on the big box stores that tried to force you to wear masks or tried to make you take a PCR test to get in or whatever. I mean, I think it's really just so important at this moment for people to start thinking about these ideas. I tend to call this exit and build. We exit from unsustainable slavery systems, as I call them, that do not align with our values and our principles, and instead focus on building or supporting those who are building new systems that are aligned with our values. And personally, I don't think politics is going to fix it. I don't think violence is the answer. Apathy is definitely not the answer. So I really try to be proactive in my own life and kind of lead by example. You mentioned I'm from Texas originally. I now live in Mexico. I decided to move like 6 years ago. We've got land, we're growing food, and trying to spread these ideas to other people. And I know more and more people who took this idea during COVID and realized, you know what, I'm living in Seattle, for example, and Seattle is a total COVID hellhole. So I'm going to move to a smaller town, or I'm going to move to Texas or Florida. That's kind of the exit and build idea as well. It's about exiting from systems, but it can also mean exiting from a physical location if you realize the place you're living in is not conducive to liberty and privacy and is going to be, a bad place to be in the future. You might decide to move to the town over, the state over, or in my case, the country over. Whatever you do, I think the point is to start thinking about how we, in our own hands, in our own lives, and in our local communities, can really get active. And I'll just throw out one other little tip that's in my book. If people want to learn more, if you're in a situation where you don't have anybody in your local area, I want to invite you to go to freedomcells.org, as in the cells in your body, freedom, CELLS.org. It's a simple place where people can use our maps and search and find like-minded groups and people in their area and connect in the real world to start talking about these ideas. So I encourage people to check that one out too.
You made a short documentary. Now, this is about 10 minutes long. I'm going to play it. I wanted to just play a clip of it, but it's very powerful, and I think it's what people need to hear and to understand what's exactly going on. And when I say that your country's being run by a handful of billionaires, this is exactly what I'm talking about. So let's watch this, because everybody had high hope for J.D. Vance and Donald Trump, that they were actually the enemies of the deep state and that the deep state was working against them. Well, now with Dan Bongino and Kash Patel going along with every garbage theory about the deep state and that they're closing down the investigation into the assassination attempt. We now know that those things were not on what they appeared to be, and just same thing with Jeffrey Epstein. So the Trump administration is not what they appeared to be, and neither is Dan Bongino and Kash Patel or any of those people in the right now the FDA is still recommending COVID boosters, just so you know. So they're not what they claim to be. But here's this is going to make it clear for people. Here we go.
Thank you very much. Wow.
Donald Trump's second term is off to a controversial start, with his supporters celebrating his executive orders to free Ross Ulbricht, end funding for schools requiring COVID-19 injections, calling for releasing the JFK, MLK, and RFK files, and ending support for U.S. aid.
So that's what we thought was coming. We were all on board for all. Donald Trump's the big fighter against the deep state and all things like that. Well, guess what happened?
Okay, that solves that problem.
However, while the MAGA movement cheers Trump for moving at a rapid pace, many of his supporters appear to be turning a blind eye to the influence of Peter Thiel and the other technocrats. Who is Peter Thiel, and what is a technocrat? Let's dive in. In the early 20th century, a movement began to develop around a political theory known as technocracy, a system wherein management of governments is handled by technical experts, often involving technology-focused solutions. Early proponents of technocracy claimed that the concept would lead to better management of resources and the protection of the planet. However, this system of governance by technological experts and their technology would also involve a loss of privacy, as well as centralization of power and the management of all human behavior.
So this is not a new thing, but now they've figured out a way to seize power, and they've done it. So this is not a new thing. This is an idea that's been around for a long time.
Though the term appears to have been largely forgotten, the technocratic philosophy and influence can be seen everywhere in our modern digital world.
Already beginning to arrive at the huge civic auditorium, where a large receptive audience turned out to hear Howard Scott as he warned of an impending crisis in America's domestic and foreign affairs.
One of the most influential proponents of technocracy was a man named Howard Scott, a writer who founded the Technical Alliance in New York City in 1919. Scott believed that business owners lacked the necessary skills and data to reform their industry, and thus, control should be handed over to engineers. The technocrats publicized their vision of a centrally planned world via books, speeches, clubs, and political parties. This resulted in a brief period of popularity in the US and Canada in the years following the Great Depression. As politicians and economists searched for a solution to the financial calamity, the technocrats imagined a world where politicians and business owners were replaced with scientists, engineers, and other technical experts who would manage the economy. However, in the 1940s, mainstream interest in the technocracy movement seemed to dissipate. The ideas that underpinned the technocratic vision received a notable endorsement in 1970 when political scientist Zbigniew Brzezinski released his book, Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technotronic Era. Brzezinski will be familiar to long-term researchers of the ruling elite. Until his death in 2018, Brzezinski was a diplomat who ran in the same circles as David Rockefeller and former Secretary of State and accused war criminal Henry Kissinger. Brzezinski served as advisor to several presidents, from Jimmy Carter to Barack Obama. He was also a member of the Atlantic Council, the National Endowment for Democracy, and the Council on Foreign Relations. Although Brzezinski's book Between Two Ages substituted the term technotronic for technocratic, the depiction of the future is the same, a world in which the scientific and technological elite centrally plan the lives of all humanity. Essentially, Brzezinski's vision is a technologically advanced, authoritarian-style collectivism wherein individual liberties are subordinated to the apparent needs of the collective. When we examine the world of 2025, we clearly see the signs of technocratic influence. For example, we can see this influence in the wealthiest companies and the most influential CEOs. These individuals are running companies that have amassed large amounts of financial wealth as well as unfathomable amounts of digital data on all of their customers. From Jeff Bezos at Amazon, Bill Gates of Microsoft, Mark Zuckerberg at Facebook, Elon Musk of Tesla and SpaceX, we can see the technocratic ideology. These men and their colleagues in various technological industries wield immense power through their companies, wealth, and cultural influence. These individuals have enough money, resources, and connections to shape elections, geoengineer the climate, and cause dips in the stock market, to name a few examples. They are the technocratic class of 2025. Who is Peter Thiel? Peter Thiel is the infamous co-founder of Palantir, the private surveillance firm with a long history of involvement and collaboration with the CIA. Thiel is also a steering committee member of the Bilderberg Group, the infamously secretive group which represents the interests of the hidden ruling class. In the second Trump administration, Thiel's influence is more visible than ever as numerous associates and acolytes of his are set to play various influential roles. Thiel has a long history of supporting the two-time president.
Tonight, I urge all of my fellow Americans to stand up and vote for Donald Trump.
An examination of Donald Trump's cabinet reveals many connections to Thiel. Vice President J.D. Vance. Despite not giving directly to the 2024 campaign, Thiel has gained well-deserved scrutiny for his role in financing the rise of Vice President J.D. Vance. Vance, the 40-year-old former senator from Ohio, was in attendance at former COO of PayPal David Sacks' June 24 fundraiser for Trump. According to two people with knowledge of the exchange, during this June event, Trump informally polled the room regarding who he should choose for vice presidential running mate. David Sacks and others in attendance all told Trump he should choose Vance. Elon Musk also reportedly encouraged Trump to pick Vance. And a few weeks later, at the 2024 Republican National Convention, that's exactly what Donald Trump did. Thiel and Vance have an extensive relationship. Vance claims that after hearing Peter Thiel deliver a speech at Yale Law School in 2011, he was inspired to pursue a career in big tech firms. He started as a junior investor with the Thiel-backed Mithril Capital in 2016. Vance briefly worked at biotech firm Circuit Therapeutics, a move which then CEO Frederick Moll told the New York Times was, quote, a favor to Peter. In 2019, Vance would found his own venture firm, Narya Capital, with financial backing from the former CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt, the billionaire investor Mark Andreessen, and of course, Peter Thiel. When Vance announced his run for Ohio Senator, Peter Thiel was there and gave $15 million to the campaign. With this money, Vance was able to secure a victory, and within 2 years, he was on the way to the White House with the full support of Peter Thiel and the technocrats. Elon Musk. While Musk is a powerful and influential technocrat in his own right, he and Thiel have their own history of collaboration. Musk and Thiel have been friends for more than 2 decades, and both men received massive financial wealth from their co-founding of PayPal. Thiel has also been a prominent investor in Musk's various ventures, including Neuralink. Musk and Peter Thiel also co-founded America PAC as their vehicle to support Trump's return to the White House. As promised, Trump nominated Musk to lead the Department of Government Efficiency. And while the idea of reducing government waste and increasing efficiency is an appealing proposition, it should also be noted that Musk's talk of efficiency is reminiscent of the little-known efficiency movement, which predated the more well-known technocracy movement. The efficiency movement sought to identify and eliminate waste in all areas of economy and society and to develop and implement best practices. Supporters of this movement included Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller. Is the goal of Trump and Musk to make government more efficient to serve the people?
We're going to make the future good.
No.
We're going to make it good.
Or is the goal to finally fulfill the dream of the original technocrats and eliminate the political and business classes in favor of machines, artificial intelligence, central planning, and managing society? David Sacks. Sacks is most well known for his involvement in the early days of PayPal, serving as the COO with Thiel as the CEO. He is considered a member of the so-called PayPal Mafia, a name given to the founders of PayPal, who later founded numerous tech companies, including Tesla, LinkedIn, Palantir, SpaceX, YouTube, and Yelp. In June 2024, it was Sacks who hosted a fundraiser for Trump at his home in San Francisco. It was this dinner where the billionaires told Trump he should choose Vance as his running mate. Shortly after his victory in the 2024 election, Trump rewarded Sacks for his loyalty by appointing him as the AI and crypto czar. In this position, Sacks is expected to greatly influence the U.S. government's policies on cryptocurrency and the advancement of AI. Howard Lutnick. Howard Lutnick is the CEO of Cantor Fitzgerald investment firm and has become a vocal proponent for Bitcoin in the last couple years. Trump recently nominated him to be U.S. Commerce Secretary. Lutnick is also an investor in Strive Asset Management, which was founded by Vivek Ramaswamy. Peter Thiel, the Founders Fund, and J.D. Vance's Narya Capital also contributed to Strive's $30 million funding round. Lutnick is also part owner of video platform Rumble, founded by Chris Pavlovski. In December 2021, Pavlovski announced his intention to take Rumble public by combining forces with CF Acquisition Corp., a division of Lutnick's Cantor Fitzgerald. Lutnick was also formerly a neighbor to Jeffrey Epstein in New York City and raised millions of dollars for Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign. Lutnick has spoken at the World Economic Forum's various meetings as far back as 2016 and as recently as January 2023. Jim O'Neill.
So Trump's whole cabinet is filled with these with technocrats, these techno-feudal lords. And let's remember that Steve Bannon reminded us and warned us about these people. And hang on, there's more to this.
Donald Trump has appointed Jim O'Neill as Deputy Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services. O'Neill has extensive connections and collaborations with Peter Thiel. O'Neill worked at two of Peter Thiel's funds, Clarion Capital and Mithril Capital Management, from 2012 to 2019. In 2010, he co-founded Peter Thiel's Thiel Fellowship. He also worked as the CEO of the Thiel Foundation from 2009 to 2012. From 2019 to July 2021, O'Neill was the CEO of SENS Research Foundation, an organization focused on rejuvenation. The SENS Foundation received its initial funding from Peter Thiel in 2006 and 2008, a fact that should come as no surprise given Thiel's own interest in fighting aging using the blood of the young. Ken Howry. Trump named Ken Howry as his pick for the U.S. ambassador to the Kingdom of Denmark. Howry previously served as a U.S. ambassador to Sweden. The connections between Howry, Peter Thiel, and the World Economic Forum run deep. Apparently, Trump sees these connections as a net positive. Howry was another PayPal co-founder with Thiel. The pair also co-founded the venture capital fund, Founders Fund. In March 2012, the World Economic Forum named Howry as a member of the Young Global Leader program. He is also a member of the selection committee for the World Economic Forum's Technology Pioneers program. Howry may have been selected for the role of ambassador to Denmark to help Trump fulfill his goal of annexing Greenland. Denmark has administrative control over Greenland as part of its kingdom. It's interesting that Trump's calls for purchasing Greenland and making it part of the United States literally mirror the original technocrats' plan for the tech native America, including Mexico, Canada, and Panama as well. Jacob Hellberg. Jacob Hellberg was appointed to be Undersecretary of State for Economic Growth, Energy, and the Environment. Hellberg donated $2 million to Donald Trump's 2024 presidential campaign. He is an ardent supporter of Israel and a former supporter of Democrats who has said that his shift to Trump was a result of Democrats becoming, quote, anti-Israel. Hellberg is also a senior advisor to Palantir Technologies, the private surveillance firm co-founded by Peter Thiel. Hellberg is also a senior advisor to Alex Karp, Peter Thiel's co-founder and current CEO of Palantir Technologies, and a fellow Bilderberg steering committee member. Donald Trump has named Michael Kratsios to serve as a science advisor and director of the White House's Office of Science and Technology Policy. Kratsios was the first Trump administration's policy specialist on artificial intelligence, drones, quantum computing, and cybersecurity. Kratsios worked for two of Peter Thiel's funds, Thiel Capital and Clarion Capital. It is abundantly clear that the second Trump administration is stacked with allies of Peter Thiel, the technocrat and steering committee member of the Bilderberg Group. One final point worth noting relates to Palantir's blind support for Israel and the Zionist cause. In November 2023, Palantir issued a letter to shareholders that stressed the company's support for Israel's quest to ethnically cleanse Palestinians. Quote, "We are one of the few companies in the world to stand up and announce our support for Israel, which remains steadfast. Palantir stands with Israel." Thiel has also made it clear he will not interfere in Israel's crimes and has no qualms supplying technology which leads to civilian deaths. First, in January 2024, Palantir announced that it had signed a strategic partnership with the Israeli Defense Ministry to supply technology for the genocide. In May 2024, protesters accused Thiel of complicity in genocide, blocking his vehicles for over an hour while he was speaking at the Cambridge Union. Over 200 students gathered outside the Cambridge Union, attempting to drown out Thiel's talk. When Thiel was directly questioned about his support of Israel and their use of AI technology to murder humans, he gave a rambling non-answer.
So I wanted to slow this part down because this is a very kind of compelling.
What do you think about the use of artificial intelligence or lavender by the IDF in identifying Hamas targets? And secondly, do you agree with Elon Musk about that the population decline is a risk for humanity?
Look, I'm not, without going into all the I'm not on top of all the details of what's going on in Israel because my bias is to defer to Israel.
Given that Thiel and company are willing to turn a blind eye to the crimes of Israel, it should come as no surprise that Trump's second cabinet is stacked with former and current associates of Thiel's who also share the zeal for Zionism and technocracy. While these troubling facts may be disturbing to MAGA, these connections need to be questioned. If we are ever to defeat the so-called deep state, we must commit ourselves to opposing techno-tyranny, no matter which political party, politician, or billionaire is promoting it.
So that's the deep state. So the new deep state are these people. So just so you know, there's the as Chris Hedges talked about, it's the corporatists against these new techno-feudalists and the oligarchs versus the corporatists. That's what this is about. So these are the new people taking control from the old guard, and they're the new deep state, and that's what's happening. And so Trump is, and by the way, there's a new in this big, beautiful bill. Trump and the GOP are making it illegal for states to pass any laws to control AI in their states. So why would they put that in there unless they're planning on doing stuff that they know people aren't going to want, that people are going to be so against that they would want their own state legislatures to stand up against it. They're preempting that, and they're making it illegal. Trump is doing that. Trump is making it illegal for local governments. Remember, conservatism is all about taking power away from the federal government and giving it to local communities. Well, he's taking that power away from local communities to stand up to all this nefarious stuff that they're planning on doing with AI and controlling your life and debanking you and giving you a state ID, a digital ID and digital banking and all that stuff. So that's in this bill too. And that's another part that I haven't even heard Rand Paul talk about that. They're just talking about the debt and the deficit. To me, this is the deep state takeover via Trump. And it's the new deep state. It's what Steve Bannon called on our show. They want a techno-feudal system where they get to rule over you, and you don't get, just like you didn't get to vote for or against medical mandating the vaccine. You just couldn't go to work, or you couldn't travel, or you couldn't go to school, or you couldn't go to college. You couldn't do anything unless you took their product, which was against, that goes against everything that I've ever thought was considered liberal. That goes against everything. That goes against what did they do? The after World War II, they had the I'm blanking on the name. I'm having a bad day. But anyway, let me bring back in Derrick. Derrick, that's a great job you did on that, by the way.
It's overwhelming.
And the Geneva Convention. That's what I was thinking of. That goes against the Geneva Convention. And it's overwhelming. It's almost, it's what I tell people about COVID, that they were lied to on such an mind-boggling scale that people cannot wrap their brains around it, so they just try to ignore it. And I think, unfortunately, that's what a lot of people are doing right now. No one's even talking about, did you know about that part in the bill where it made it illegal for states to pass laws trying to regulate AI? Did you know about that, Derrick?
I have seen that going around. I've seen had a few people share that with me, and I think you're absolutely right to emphasize that, Jimmy, because that is an important piece of the puzzle. And it should be no surprise ultimately, though, because, and first, thank you for showing my short film there. It was an effort to try to reach more people. If you look at all those people, David Sachs, obviously Palantir, Musk, et cetera, these are all people with deep connections to the AI industry. And of course, we should go back the first month of Trump's administration announcing the Stargate program with OpenAI and Oracle, other companies with CIA connections. These are all coming back from the big AI, big tech industry. So of course, this big, beautiful bill that Trump's in love with would have something like that snuck in there to keep the government off the backs of his buddies. And, personally, I'm a libertarian. I'm an anarchist. I'm not somebody who rushes to government regulation as the answer for everything or even the first move. But I will say I do believe we are in an unprecedented, unique time with facial recognition combined with artificial intelligence, that it does present a very unique threat. And it seems sensible to try to find some way to limit it or control the way that it's used. And maybe that's, it's just not going to happen. It's out of the box now. But the idea that, like you said, government could then tell local bodies they can't even attempt to regulate it goes against everything that conservatism or constitutionalism is supposed to be about.
It's much scarier than people thought. It's the opposite of what MAGA. I know I have lots of lefties and union workers and military and lots of MAGA that come to my shows. I travel all over the country, including Canada, and now I'm going to the UK and Dublin, Manchester and Birmingham and Glasgow and every place. And those people who come out, they're not for this. They're again. In fact, they're diametrically opposed to this thing that Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are ushering in. And I had Whitney Webb on the show months and months ago, and she kind of talked about this exact thing too, and who Peter Thiel is beholden to and who Trump is beholden to. And I didn't really see it playing out as clearly as I do now. In that video, your documentary really illuminates it for someone like me, and now I get it. And so I'll be opposing it. And
could I mention one more name, Jimmy?
Sure.
Just one more name. Sorry to cut you off, but one more name that I think you and the audience might want to be aware of is, in addition to the people you just mentioned, there is Curtis Yarvin.
Yes.
Curtis Yarvin is the man who
Yes.
actually he's the thinker behind these men. And I wrote an article a few months back at The Last American Vagabond called Meet the Man Whose Philosophy Has Been Guiding Peter Thiel and the Technocrats. And I heard you mention J.D. Vance earlier, and I just wanted to share this real quick section that for those, I didn't know about this till I wrote the article, but back in 2021, J.D. Vance was on this podcast called Jack Murphy Live. And I don't know anything about the guy or the podcast, but it's a conservative podcast. This is when he was just running as a Senate candidate in Ohio. And folks might remember that Peter Thiel is the one who gave him $21 million. It was the biggest financial contribution at the time. It may still be, and who helped him become Ohio senator, which then catapulted him, of course, to the vice presidency. And during this interview with Jack Murphy, Vance said, quote, "I think what Trump should do, if I was giving him one piece of advice, fire every single mid-level bureaucrat, every civil servant in the administrative state, replace them with our people, and then when the courts stop you, stand before the country and say, the Chief Justice has made his ruling, now let him enforce it." And, which is kind of what Trump is doing now. But then later on in the interview, who does J.D. Vance give credit for these ideas? He says, quote, "So there's this guy, Curtis Yarvin, who's written all about some of these things. And so I just want people to look into Curtis Yarvin, his sort of dark enlightenment, neo-reactionary movement. He has, for the longest time, said very much what the technocrats describe, what I described in that documentary, that the voters are too stupid to know what's good for them, that the business capitalist class is not really doing our work, and instead we need to have and at the head of that, this is Democrats called for. So this is the guy who has influenced the thinking of Peter Thiel and J.D. Vance, who's the vice president and next in line for the White House. I think people should look more at him as well and the ideas that he's been promoting for the last decade.
Yes, Curtis Yarvin is the thought leader for all these people. And so, you know what? That's a great idea. I should do a segment on Curtis Yarvin because nobody knows who that guy is. And he's actually the quiet guy behind the scenes that nobody knows, who's pulling the strings on all this stuff. He's the guy they all follow, and they say so publicly. So
there's an article on Yarvin in the New Yorker, and it's called "Curtis Yarvin's Plot Against America," June 2nd, 2025, just came out.
Oh, really? Okay, so maybe we'll cover that on Friday.
Wow.
All right, Derrick Broze, I appreciate all your information and sharing your documentary with us and letting me play it on my show. Everybody, where should people go where's the best place for people to find you? TheConsciousResistance.com?
TheConsciousResistance.com has been my website since 2013. So you'll find my podcast, my documentaries, my books, all that there. And of course, you can find me on Twitter, on all the social media. If people want more about my journalism, I will mention you can check out my free 17-part documentary series called The Pyramid of Power. I'll come back and talk to you about that sometime, Jimmy, because it goes deep into the education system, big tech, et cetera, and progressively gets deeper. And in about a month, we're going to be releasing the final 17th episode, trying to answer the question of who or what is at the top of this pyramid. And I think it's unlike any other work it's not a conspiracy documentary, it's a true crime documentary. Again, everybody can watch it for free at thepyramidofpower.net. And I appreciate you having me on tonight, Jimmy, and thanks for all that you're doing.
Okay, thank you, Derrick Broze.